If you're new here, smash that like button, drop a comment with your wildest HFY theory, and don't forget to subscribe for more humanity versus the galaxy stories. Now, let me tell you what happened the day every alien in the council chamber froze in terror, except for one human. The chamber was vast, its walls alive with projected constellations, the air thick with the murmur of 100 species. Delegates shuffled in semicircles of jeweled robes and armored carapaces, voices pitched with fear. The centerpiece of their gathering was not the marble dais, nor the pulsing banners of empires, it was the cage. 10 meters high, forged from alloys strong enough to withstand plasma bombardment, it sat like a monolith at the heart of the hall. Inside crouched a nightmare. They called it the Dusk Maw. Scaled hide scored with battle scars, forelimbs ending in talons longer than most alien swords, a jaw bristling with rows of teeth built to shear through armor. Its eyes burned molten gold, unblinking as they scanned the chamber. Even chained, it radiated menace, every breath vibrating like the growl of an engine before it tore itself apart. Whole fleets had been lost to a single one of its kind. Every alien present knew this, and every one of them trembled. An elder of the Verric shuddered behind his veil. This thing should never have been brought here. It is death incarnate. No walls can hold it. Another voice, brittle with fear, snapped back. We brought it to show the others what we face. To decide together whether it must be exterminated. Exterminated. The word echoed like a prayer through the hall. Some delegates nodded frantically. Others hid behind their guards. No one looked directly into the cage for long. The Maw's gaze seemed to peel away composure. One figure, however, did not avert his eyes. Standing at the fringes of the assembly, hands resting on a simple medkit strap, was Elias Ward. Tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform plain compared to the brocade and armor around him, he looked less like a diplomat and more like a man who had wandered into the wrong room. A human. Barely acknowledged, considered an afterthought in the galactic order. Yet his gaze was steady. He studied the beast not with fear but with a frown of recognition. He saw how its chest labored unevenly, how it shifted weight to protect one hind leg, how blood crusted faintly at the edge of a half-healed wound. To him, it did not look like a god of destruction. It looked like a wounded animal, cornered and in pain. A ripple of panic spread as the predator shifted, chains groaning, claws dragging sparks from the reinforced floor. Delegates shrieked. Guards raised their rifles. The Maw's roar thundered through the chamber, a sound that made stomachs twist and instincts scream for flight. Half the assembly bolted for the exits. Elias did not move. He had heard roars like that before, different throats, different battles. Wolves in war zones, feral dogs on blood-soaked fields, the guttural cries of men torn between fear and rage. To most, a roar was a warning. To him, it was a plea buried beneath power. Counselor Thevra, scaled and silver, slammed a clawed hand on her lectern. No one may approach it. Not without authorization. To touch it is to sign your death sentence. But Elias had already taken a step forward. His boots echoed on the polished stone. Murmurs swelled into gasps. The human walked the aisle as though gravity pressed lighter on him than on anyone else. Every alien eye tracked his movement, horrified and transfixed. He reached the cage. The air there was hotter, tinged with copper and ozone. The predator lowered its head slightly as though curious, nostrils flaring at his scent. For a moment, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Elias crouched, setting the medkit at his side. He didn't open it yet. He didn't need bandages or instruments to begin. He simply looked into those molten eyes and spoke, low and even. "You're hurting, aren't you?" Gasps rippled. The notion of addressing the Maw as one would a companion was insanity itself. The beast rumbled, sound rolling deep through its chest, shaking dust from the cage supports. Yet it did not lunge. It did not bite. It watched. Elias remained still, not challenging, not flinching. His calm was almost unnatural, but it was not born of arrogance. It was recognition, born of too many nights in tents surrounded by wounded soldiers, where calm meant survival. The beast shifted again, weight settling with a heavy thud. One massive eye blinked slowly. Not an attack, an acknowledgement. From the galleries, voices screamed. "Pull him back. He'll be killed. Stop this madness." But guards did not move. None dared enter the radius of the Maw's presence. Elias finally sat cross-legged, resting his arms loosely on his knees. He didn't reach for the cage yet. He simply shared the space. Time stretched. The hall seemed suspended in silence except for the creature's steady growl and the soft rhythm of human breathing. A counselor whispered in terror, "He isn't afraid." He wasn't. His heart beat steady, though sweat dampened the back of his neck. He wasn't immune to fear, only practiced at walking through it. The maw tilted its head. It lowered until the tip of its jaw brushed the alloy bars, chains creaking in protest. The eye fixed on him was the size of his hand. It blinked again. Elias slowly lifted his palm, hovering just inches from the bars. His fingers trembled, but his resolve did not. The chamber braced for blood. Every alien present leaned forward as though unable to stop themselves. The beast did not strike. It inhaled, scenting him, and then, quietly, impossibly, it exhaled. Warm breath, laced with copper and musk, washed over him. Elias smiled faintly. "Not a monster," he murmured. "Just tired." The dusk maw shifted again, settling lower, its massive chest pressing the ground, chains slackening. For the first time in recorded memory, it appeared calm. The counselors whispered in panic, in awe, in disbelief. And Elias sat there still, unbroken, eye to eye with the terror of the stars. The moment would not last forever. The beast still had wounds untended, and the chamber still seethed with fear and politics. But as Elias rested his hand against the bars, steady as stone, the galaxy itself seemed to tilt toward a new axis. He had not tamed it. He had not conquered it. He had simply refused to fear it. And the predator had noticed. The silence in the chamber was deafening. The story had only begun. The chamber did not breathe. Aliens clutched their cloaks, some trembling so hard their ornaments rattled, others whispering prayers to gods whose names had never been spoken aloud in the council before. The human remained by the cage, his hand lingering close to the bars, his voice low and steady. Elias Ward did not look like a conqueror. He looked like a man sitting with a wounded creature at the edge of a forest clearing, watching its chest rise and fall, waiting for trust to grow. That, to the council, was somehow more terrifying than any weapon. The predator's head dipped until the cage rattled. Its golden eyes locked on Elias, unblinking, molten with a kind of intelligence most still refused to admit it possessed. One claw tapped once against the floor. The vibration echoed through the chamber like a hammer on a war drum. Delegates leaned back instinctively, but Elias only tilted his head, observing. Then, slowly, he extended his hand until his fingertips brushed against the scales beneath the monster's jaw. The sound that followed shattered centuries of certainty. Not a roar. Not a snarl. A deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through the cage and into the bones of everyone present. It was not the sound of rage. It was not even warning. It was contentment. The galaxy's deadliest predator was purring under a human's touch. Gasps and cries exploded. One delegate fainted, his armored guards scrambling to catch him. A woman of the Tarlik screeched, "It is a trick. An abomination. This cannot be real." Another shouted accusations of sorcery, of genetic tampering, of some hidden device implanted in the beast's skull. No explanation satisfied the raw, undeniable sight before them. The dusk maw leaning into the touch of a human like a hound reunited with its master. Elias did not smile. He did not gloat. He only scratched gently, his eyes calm, his movements slow, measured. He whispered, "That's better, isn't it?" As though the entire galaxy had not just appended itself around him. His voice carried across the chamber, amplified not by technology but by the silence his act commanded. The predator shifted again, lowering its head until it pressed fully against the bars, chains clattering as slack returned to the restraints. Elias leaned forward, careful, reading the creature's breathing like a pulse. He knew he could be killed in an instant, but the fact didn't matter. What mattered was that the beast was tired, and he could ease it, if only a fraction. He was not here to tame a monster. He was here to remind it that not all hands reached for chains. An armed guard moved from the perimeter, weapon raised, panic in his eyes. He shouted for Elias to step away. The predator's purr cut off in an instant, turning to a low growl, fangs flashing. The entire chamber tensed, convinced that this was the end of the foolish human. But Elias didn't recoil. He turned his head just enough to meet the guard's eyes and said evenly, "Lower your weapon." The guard hesitated, then obeyed, hands trembling. The growl receded. The purr returned. It was obedience, but not to the soldier, it was obedience to Elias. A shudder ran through the council seats. They were not witnessing domination. They were witnessing choice. The realization gnawed at them more than fear itself. Memories flickered in Elias's mind. Nights crouched in rubble, listening to wounded wolves circle the perimeter of his camp. The moment he had realized that fear had limits, but patience could breach them. He had fed them scraps, let them approach on their terms. Later, soldiers had called him mad for it, but none of them were mauled. He understood predators. If you treated them as demons, they became demons. If you gave them space, they revealed something else. The galaxy had never given this creature space. It had only hunted, chained, and condemned. Elias breathed slowly, resting his hand on his knee once more. The predator's gaze tracked him with intensity but no malice. For a moment, Elias felt as though he were the one being measured, tested. The verdict came when the beast lowered its head to the floor, exhaling a gust that stirred Elias's hair. Chains slackened again, and the hall filled with the sound of stunned silence. A counselor rose, his voice shrill, desperate. "This is manipulation. The human uses tricks. The beast has been weakened, broken." Yet when drones were ordered forward to prove the point, the predator's eyes ignited with fury. It snapped, teeth smashing steel like twigs, drones exploding in showers of sparks. The roar that followed drove some delegates to their knees. The chains trembled on the verge of breaking. But Elias raised his hand, palm outward, voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Enough. The impossible happened again. The predator stopped. Not after a struggle, not after hesitation. Immediately. It turned its head back toward him, gaze fixed, breathing ragged. Its claws retracted. The hall was still, every species choking on terror and awe. The beast obeyed him. The council chamber erupted in shouts, in protests, in theories of doom. But none could deny what they had seen. The Dusk Maw had been feared as an unthinking engine of death for centuries. Yet in the space of minutes, it had answered to the calm hand of a human medic. Elias stood slowly, gathering his medkit, his posture as steady as when he had walked forward. He did not revel in their fear or their confusion. He only looked back once at the creature, then at the council, his voice quiet but cutting. "You see a monster. I see someone who's been hurt and left alone too long. Maybe the problem isn't him. Maybe it's you." The words were gasoline on an already burning chamber. Delegates shouted louder, guards fumbled for orders, and the predator's purr deepened, vibrating like a drumbeat of change. Elias stepped back into the crowd's gaze, not triumphant but resolute, leaving behind the image no one could erase. A man and a monster, bound by something that defied every law the galaxy thought it knew. The silence after his words did not soothe. It lingered heavy, expectant. The story was not finished. Something had begun that none of them could control. The council chamber boiled with outrage. The moment the predator stilled beneath Elias Ward's hand, centuries of certainty unraveled into a storm of fear. Delegates shrieked over one another, voices like knives in the air. Some shouted for the human's immediate execution, others for the predator's destruction, and more for the silencing of humanity before their species grew dangerous. Yet under the chaos, no one could erase the image, the Dusk Maw pressing its scarred head against the bars while a human scratched beneath its chin. The beast still lay there, massive chest heaving, golden eyes tracking every movement. It ignored the drones that hovered nervously nearby. It ignored the guards clutching plasma rifles. It ignored the hundreds of eyes that watched it with horror. Its focus rested solely on Elias, who now stood quietly, medkit at his side, as though waiting for the galaxy to breathe again. The chamber's dais quivered under the slam of a Verric fist. Counselor Threvla, plated in silver scales, pointed a claw toward the human. "This is no coincidence. Humanity has done something. Some weapon, some control agent. No predator submits unless broken, and that thing is not broken." Elias opened his mouth, but another voice cut across the hall before he could answer. From the shadows near the chamber's guard post stepped a man in the uniform of Earth's security forces. His dark hair was cropped close, his jaw sharp, his eyes carrying the hard humor of one who had lived too long on the line between order and chaos. Commander Joran Cray moved with the ease of a soldier who had seen enough death to be unshaken by it. He folded his arms and leaned against the rail as though the hysteria before him was merely tedious. "Funny," he said, his voice carrying through the noise, "on Earth we don't break predators. We live with them. Sometimes we even take them home." The chamber hissed at his insolence. A dozen species spat curses, but Joran did not flinch. He nodded toward Elias. "You call it sorcery. We call it patience. You call it madness. We call it Tuesday." Elias shot him a quick look, part warning, part gratitude, but Joran only smirked. He had always been the kind to hurl stones at hornets' nests just to see how they scattered. Yet beneath the sarcasm, his eyes flicked constantly to his friend, to the predator, calculating threats the way a soldier always did. The tension mounted as drones advanced again. The predator rumbled low, teeth glinting, chains straining. Elias raised his hand in warning. "Back, he said quietly, and the words struck harder than a gunshot. The predator froze, muscles trembling with withheld violence. The drones hesitated, then retreated. Delegates gasped anew, convinced this was impossible, convinced the human's voice carried some hidden code. But no device glimmered, no implant shone. It was simply obedience, earned not with force but with trust. Panic gave way to calculation. Several counselors huddled in clusters, their words sharp with conspiracy. If humans could command them all, what else could they command? Fleets? Armies? Other predators waiting in the dark? Fear mutated into politics, into survival. Some argued for humanity's exile from all council territories. Others whispered of assassination. The younger species, desperate for safety, demanded immediate action before Earth's supposed new weapon shifted the balance of power forever. Elias stood still, letting their words flow over him like wind against stone. He saw what they did not: the deep wounds carved into the predator's flank, the labored pull of breath. The chains bit cruelly into scarred wrists, yet the beast made no move against him. He stepped closer, resting one hand gently on the bars, voice low but steady. "Shade," he murmured, naming it for the dark patterns rippling across its scales. The predator's ears twitched. His breathing slowed. The name lingered between them like a bond sealed in silence. The chamber erupted again. It responds to him by name. This cannot be tolerated. Destroy them both. The uproar built until it cracked like glass under pressure. Joran pushed off the rail, his tone harder now. "You all wanted proof the maw could never be controlled. Well, here's your proof. You were wrong. Maybe the problem isn't the beast. Maybe the problem is how you treated it." His words struck like blows. Aliens turned their fury on him, but he stood unmoved, a soldier among diplomats, unconcerned by their posturing. Then came the test no one expected. A squad of armored hunters, eager to restore their authority, surged forward. They attempted to drive Elias away from the cage, their weapons humming with power. The predator's growl turned volcanic. Chains snapped taut, claws slashed through steel as though it were cloth. Hunters screamed as their drones exploded, shredded in seconds. Sparks showered the chamber. Delegates collapsed behind their guards. The maw reared, a storm of rage unleashed. And then Elias lifted his hand. No words this time, only the calm signal of his palm raised. The predator's attack stopped mid-swipe, talons dripping sparks. For a long, impossible moment, it hovered on the knife edge between carnage and restraint. Then, with a sound like mountains grinding, it lowered its claw and pressed itself back to the floor. The silence that followed was absolute. Elias's voice was quiet, but every being heard it. "He is not your prisoner. And I am not his master. But he has chosen." He stepped back slowly, his eyes never leaving Shade's. The predator rumbled, softer now, the sound almost protective, as if declaring to the entire galaxy that no harm would touch the human while it breathed. The chamber was paralyzed. Even the bravest counselors found their throats dry, their eyes wide. The evidence was undeniable. The predator, bane of fleets, scourge of empires, had obeyed. And it had obeyed one man. In the shadows, whispers of plots thickened. Elias felt them like cold drafts against his skin. Some would never allow this bond to stand. Some would send assassins before dawn. But as Shade's massive eye lingered on him, unwavering, Elias knew the assassins would meet more than one defender. The creature had chosen its place. It would not be moved. Joran caught his friend's eye, lips quirking with grim humor. "Congratulations. You've just made us the most hated species in the galaxy." Elias gave no answer, only kept his gaze fixed on the predator that watched him with something far older than hatred, something the council had never considered possible: loyalty. The chamber dissolved into shouts again, but beneath the noise, a new silence had taken root. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of inevitability, of recognition that a truth had been revealed which no decree could erase. Humanity had crossed a threshold, and the galaxy would never step back. The storm was only beginning. The council could not leave the matter unsettled. Panic might drive species to war if proof was not dragged into the light. So they devised trials, each one meant to reveal deception, each one meant to shatter the illusion that a human had tamed the galaxy's nightmare. Delegates arrived cloaked in suspicion, guards ringed the chamber with weapons drawn, and Shade was chained again at the center like a monument to dread. Elias Ward stood nearby, calm despite the fury of 100 eyes. Commander Joran Cray watched from the shadows, his hand never straying far from his sidearm, as though he expected the council to turn on Elias any second. The first trial was separation. Blast doors sealed Elias into a chamber far from the predator, while hunters prodded Shade with shock spears and bellowed taunts in a dozen languages. The beast erupted, tearing steel floor plates apart, claws carving sparks into the air. Chains cracked, walls groaned, drones shattered like toys in a child's hands. The predator hurled itself at the sealed doors until the entire dais shuddered, until counselors begged to end the test before the station itself buckled. When the doors hissed open and Elias stepped back into view, Shade froze mid-rage. Its chest heaved, its golden eyes locked on the human, and then, impossibly, it sank back to the ground, claws folding against the floor. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. The message was carved into every heart present. The beast did not calm for chains or weapons. It calmed only for Elias. The second trial was temptation. Delegates demanded proof that the bond was not simply hunger disguised as loyalty. They placed food before Shade, dripping haunches of meat, vats of protein slurry, delicacies harvested from a dozen worlds. The predator ignored them all, growling low, restless, until Elias approached with nothing more than a ration pack from his kit. Shade leaned down, jaws capable of severing starship armor, and took the food delicately from Elias's hands. The growl subsided. The predator ate only from him, the sound of its chewing underscoring the chamber's disbelief. "You see trickery," Elias said softly, "but I see choice." He trusts no one who treated him as a beast. Only the one who treated him as a being. The third trial was cruelty. Against Elias's protests, guards dragged another captive predator into the chamber, a smaller but still ferocious creature, its muzzle bound, its body quivering in panic. The hope was to incite Shade to frenzy, to expose bloodlust unrestrained. Instead, Shade snarled not at the captive, but at the guards who forced it forward. It thrashed against chains until Elias stepped into the ring, palm raised. The predator stilled instantly. Elias freed the smaller creature, guiding it away with quiet words until it vanished into the corridors. Shade watched, silent, chest rumbling low. The trial ended without slaughter. The lesson was carved deeper. The predator did not crave violence. It obeyed the ethic of the one it had chosen. Rumors spread faster than ships. Across the stars, whispers hardened into belief. The deadliest predator in existence bowed to humanity. Empires that had mocked Earth as provincial now spoke of fleets poised for preemptive war. Lesser species whispered about pledging themselves to humans, if only to share the strange shield that could make monsters kneel. The council chamber became a nest of knives, every delegate scrambling to twist events to their advantage. Elias endured it quietly. He refused to posture, refused to turn Shade into a weapon, though he knew others already saw him that way. Joran grew restless, prowling the shadows, warning Elias each night that assassins would come. "They fear you more than the Maw," he said. "Fear makes knives sharp." Elias only shook his head, resting a hand on Shade's scarred jaw as the predator settled near his quarters like a sentinel carved from living night. "Let them come," Elias murmured. "They'll find I'm not standing alone." The strike came as Joran predicted. Shadows moved through the humans' quarters, cloaked assassins slipping past guards with poison blades humming. They expected a sleeping man. They found a nightmare waiting. Shade tore through the wall with a roar that rattled bones, eyes blazing gold in the dark. Assassins slashed, plasma bolts screamed, but claws faster than sight shredded weapons and bodies alike. Sparks and blood painted the chamber. In the chaos, Elias stood calm, his voice steady above the slaughter. "Enough." Shade froze, chest heaving, talons inches from the last assassin's throat. The survivor collapsed, weeping as the predator stepped back. It would have killed for him, but it would also stay its hand for him. That truth spread faster than any report. After that night, no one doubted the bond. Delegates no longer asked whether the predator had chosen Elias. They asked what it meant. Some whispered of revolutions. Some whispered of extinction. But all understood, the chain of fear had been broken. The Dusk Maw was no longer an untamed terror. It was loyal. It was loyal to a human. Joran confronted Elias the next morning, his humor stripped bare. "You've changed everything. You think this ends with the council nodding politely? They're going to burn worlds to stop what they saw last night. And Shade." He glanced at the predator, who sat silently, golden eyes unblinking as it watched over Elias's bed like a hound. "Shade won't let anyone touch you. You've made him your shadow. That's going to scare them more than any fleet ever could." Elias placed a hand on Shade's jaw, meeting the molten gaze. "I didn't make him anything," he decided. Shade leaned into the touch, rumbled deep, and lowered its head beside the human's chair as if to confirm the words. Joran shook his head, muttering, decided to turn the galaxy upside down. That night, Elias woke to the faint sound of claws tapping stone. Shade sat at the foot of his quarters, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, its form a massive silhouette against the walls. It did not sleep. It watched, patient, protective, a sentinel forged from nightmare yet softened by choice. Elias exhaled, realizing the truth that now chained him as firmly as Shade's loyalty. He had not merely saved the predator. He had become its purpose. And that purpose would shake the galaxy to its core. The council's next session loomed, and every corridor hummed with rumor. Some demanded humanity's exile. Some demanded Elias's death. Some whispered of alliances never before possible. But beneath it all ran a current stronger than fear, inevitability. The galaxy had changed and no decree could reverse it. Shade had chosen. The storm that would follow had only just begun. The chamber was suffocating with anticipation. Delegates from 100 species filled the tiers, their voices low and venomous, their fear rising like heat off stone. The council dais glittered with cold light, the High Chancellor's eyes fixed on Elias Ward as if the human himself were the danger, not the beast crouched at his side. Shade loomed close, a mountain of scarred muscle and golden eyes that gleamed like coals in shadow. Commander Joran Cray stood slightly behind Elias, hand brushing the butt of his sidearm, though they both knew no weapon here could decide the day. The Chancellor's voice cut through the air like steel. Human Elias Ward. You stand accused of disrupting galactic order. You have bound the Maw, the terror of 12 wars, and by doing so you threaten balance. Many demand your execution. Many demand your world be isolated until this anomaly is corrected. What say you? Elias did not flinch. His voice carried steady, though tension coiled around every word. I did not bind him. He chose. You call it a threat, but you've missed the truth standing in front of you. He could slaughter all present, yet he does not. That restraint, his loyalty, is more powerful than your fear. You fear what you do not control. But control was never the point. The delegates erupted, voices clashing like blades. Some shrieked that the human lied, that trickery bound the predator. Others argued that even if it were true, such loyalty made humanity dangerous beyond measure. Joran's eyes darted across the chamber, reading the chaos with a soldier's instinct. They're split, he murmured under his breath. Half want you dead, half want you crowned. The Chancellor raised a hand, demanding silence. Then let the test be final. If what you claim is truth, the predator will prove it here. At his signal, a dozen hunters strode forward, each one bristling with weapons, armor etched with the scars of beasts slain. They fanned out around Elias, their eyes fixed on Shade, daring it to resist. The air grew thick, taut, as the creature rumbled low, muscles flexing like drawn cables. Shade, Elias whispered, voice pitched for no ears but the predator's. Stay with me. The hunters lunged. Spears crackled with electric fury, nets unfurled with arcs of plasma, all meant to pin the nightmare down. Shade roared, the sound rattling bones, claws flashing like falling meteors. But its fury did not scatter blindly. Every strike was measured, every lunge curved around Elias as though he were the still center of a storm. Weapons splintered, armor shattered, hunters reeled back broken and bleeding, yet not one blow so much as brushed the human. In the end, Shade towered above the survivors, chest heaving, but Elias stood untouched in its shadow. The silence that followed was shattering. Delegates stared, frozen, as if the floor itself had fallen away. The Chancellor's composure cracked for the first time, a tremor ghosting across his expression. Elias placed a hand on Shade's jaw, steady and gentle, and the predator lowered its head like a knight bowing to its liege. You see, Elias said, his voice echoing through the hall. Fear taught you to see only monsters. But loyalty transforms them. He could have killed. He chose not to. He chose me. And what he chose is humanity. The word struck deeper than any blade. Some delegates leaned forward, eyes wide with a glimmer of awe. Others recoiled, muttering darkly about danger multiplied 1,000-fold. Joran's pulse hammered in his throat as he scanned the room, sensing the tide shifting. Humanity's reputation would never be what it was before. It would rise, or it would burn. The Chancellor tried to seize control. No creature may dictate galactic law. If this predator sides with humanity, then humanity itself becomes the threat. You cannot expect us to accept this. Elias stepped forward, Shade shadowing him with a growl so deep it vibrated the chamber floor. You don't have to accept it. You only have to recognize it. The galaxy has lived in fear of the Maw for centuries. Now it listens to a human. You can cling to fear or you can learn what comes after it. Either way, the choice is no longer yours alone. Whispers rippled through the tears. Some voices spoke of alliance, of hope that a species capable of taming death itself might also guard the weak. Others hissed of preemptive strikes, of burning Earth to cinders before its people turned nightmares into armies. The chamber was a tinderbox waiting for a spark. And then the spark came. A delegate lunged forward, weapon drawn, spitting curses. A coward's move meant to end the debate with Elias's blood. But Shade moved faster than thought. In a blur of black muscle and claws, the predator pinned the would-be assassin to the floor, talons poised against his throat. Every being in the chamber leaned forward, breath caught, waiting for the inevitable kill. Shade. Elias's voice cut the silence. Come. Certain. The predator froze, golden eyes locked on the human. For one terrible heartbeat, the chamber hung between slaughter and restraint. Then Shade growled low and withdrew. The assassin scrambled away, pale and shaking, his weapon clattering across the floor. Elias turned to face the council. That is the truth. He is not ruled by instinct. He listens. He decides. And he decides to trust me. The hall thundered with reaction. For the first time in memory, the Dusk Maw, the creature mothers used to frighten children, the terror armies feared to face, had spared a life at a human's word. Fear twisted into awe, into reverence, into a dangerous kind of hope. The Chancellor could no longer hide his unease. His voice faltered as he tried to reclaim order. This changes nothing. Humanity remains under watch. The Council will. No, Elias interrupted, his voice ringing clear. This changes everything. You can exile me, cage me, kill me, but the truth is already loose. Every world will know that humanity is not prey. We are something you cannot measure. Something even predators will follow. Shade pressed its massive head against Elias's shoulder, a gesture of devotion that needed no translation. Joran stared, words failing him for once as the chamber dissolved into chaos. Some shouted for alliance. Others shouted for war. But beneath it all, Elias stood calm, a human and his shadow beast united, while the galaxy realized its old balance had died in that moment. The Chancellor's voice drowned in the storm of voices. Decisions splintered, factions bloomed, the galaxy cracked down the middle. But no one could deny what they had seen. The nightmare of 12 wars had bowed its head to a man. Elias looked up at the tears of alien faces, at fear twisting into belief, and felt the weight of destiny settle on his shoulders. He had not sought it, but it was his now. Humanity had a place no decree could strip away. Shade rumbled beside him, the sound both threat and promise. Joran stepped closer, his voice low but fierce. You just set the galaxy on fire, Elias. Elias exhaled, hand still resting on the predator's scarred jaw. Then let it burn. Maybe in the ashes, something new can grow. The chamber shook with the voices of 1,000 species, their future rewritten in an instant. A human and a predator stood together, and nothing in the universe would ever be the same again.